Kaela Drayce smiled for the cameras, clutching a photo of her missing best friend, Virelle Senn, as tears welled in her eyes. But behind that flawless image was a deadly secret buried deep in the woods, along with the woman she claimed to love, like a sister. In the quiet town of Ember Lake, life moved slowly. Tucked between rolling hills and shadowed woods, it was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's pets by name and secrets didn't stay buried for long. But even in this peaceful community, no one suspected the darkness that would soon surface behind the smiles of two inseparable women, Kaela Drayce and Virelle Senn. Kaela Drayce was the town's most noticeable personality. With her flawless looks, designer clothes, and effortless charm, she moved through social scenes like she was born to be admired. She came from old money and spent her time organizing charity events, hosting brunches, and posing for pictures with the local elite. People often said she lit up a room, but only a few noticed how she seemed to dim the lights around others to do it. Virelle Senn, on the other hand, had a quieter glow. She worked as a nurse at Ember Lake Regional Hospital, spending long nights on her feet and even longer days caring for patients who barely remembered her name. Her life was built on compassion, patience, and persistence. Where Kaela thrived on attention, Virelle was content in the background, building a future step by step. Her dedication and warmth earned her respect, though she never sought it. Despite their differences, Kaela and Virelle had been best friends for over a decade. They met during a university orientation program, and the connection was instant. Kaela needed someone to anchor her chaotic energy, and Virelle needed someone to pull her out of her shell. Together, they balanced each other, or so it seemed. 2. Outsiders, their friendship looked perfect. They took vacations together, celebrated birthdays with matching dresses, and posted endless photos with captions like "my other half" and "soul sister." But under the surface, cracks had begun to form. Cracks only Kaela saw, and only Virelle felt. As the years went by, Virelle started to build something steady. She began seeing someone serious, a man from out of town who shared her dreams of a quiet life. Soon, Virelle announced she was moving to another state to start fresh. New job, new home, new chapter. Everyone congratulated her. Everyone, that is, except Kaela. To Kaela, the announcement felt like betrayal. How could Virelle leave her behind? They had made plans for a future that revolved around each other. Virelle's success, her happiness, her independence, it all made Kaela feel small, forgotten, irrelevant. She masked her jealousy behind a forced smile, nodding and hugging, but something inside her shifted. Something dangerous. As Virelle prepared for her move, Kaela offered to help pack and throw her a farewell party. She brought gifts, offered to drive her around for last-minute errands, and posted lengthy emotional tributes on social media. To everyone else, she was the supportive best friend. But behind closed doors, Kaela was unraveling. Her thoughts twisted into knots of resentment. She began replaying old conversations, convincing herself that Virelle had been planning to leave, her all along. Then, one weekend, Virelle vanished. Her friends assumed she had gone early to settle in before her new job began. But when she didn't respond to messages or calls, and her car was found abandoned near a hiking trail she never visited, people began to worry. At first, Kaela acted surprised, then concerned, then devastated. As the days passed and Virelle remained missing, Kaela Drayce became the face of a growing local tragedy. News outlets flocked to Ember Lake to cover the mysterious disappearance of the beloved nurse, and Kaela made sure she was always camera-ready. She wore somber colors, kept her makeup minimal to appear emotionally drained, and often clutched a framed photo of Virelle during interviews. Her voice trembled when she spoke of their friendship, and her eyes filled with tears at just the right moments. To the public, she was the grieving best friend fighting to bring her soulmate home. Behind the scenes, however, something didn't sit right with investigators. while Kaela appeared cooperative, offering detailed accounts of the last time she saw Virelle. Her behavior felt performative. She cried too easily and too often in front of reporters, but hardly at all when speaking to police. She offered help with the search efforts, but only in front of cameras. She answered questions, but often diverted conversations back to herself. How she was coping, how deeply she was suffering, how unfair life had become. One of the detectives, Gavin Morrix, noted Kaela's shifting expressions during interviews. She would go from solemn to flirtatious in seconds, especially when she sensed attention. During follow-up interviews, she began arriving in low-cut tops and expensive perfume, flashing confident smiles and lightly touching officers' arms while speaking. At first, some dismissed it as stress or misplaced grief. But for seasoned investigators, her actions raised red flags. While the town was caught in the drama of the disappearance, Kaela made herself a permanent fixture in every search party, memorial and vigil. She brought custom t-shirts with Virelle's face printed on them. She held hands with Virelle's family and offered heartfelt prayers, all while making sure photographers captured her in the best light. Her social media accounts were flooded with emotional posts, hashtags, and videos of herself visiting the last place Virelle had been seen. She even posted a tearful clip, kneeling at the hiking trail, whispering, "Please come home." But inconsistencies began to appear. Kaela claimed she had last seen Virelle on a Thursday afternoon, helping her pack boxes. Yet a neighbor's doorbell camera showed Kaela's car pulling out of Virelle's driveway much later that night, long after she claimed to have left. When asked about the time discrepancy, Kaela said she had forgotten something and gone back. But her story changed again during a second interview. The lies were small, but noticeable. More surveillance footage surfaced, this time from a gas station near the hiking trail. It showed Kaela stopping there alone early on the morning after. Virelle was last seen. Her car's trunk appeared full, covered by a dark blanket. She stayed at the pump for nearly 20 minutes, looking around nervously and checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. Investigators began to wonder, why had she gone to that area at all? It wasn't near her home or Virelle's. As Kaela continued to play the role of mourning friend, detectives began pulling phone records, financial transactions, and GPS data. Her search history was carefully reviewed. That's when they found something chilling. Queries about how long it takes a body to decompose in shallow soil, and best way to hide scent from cadaver dogs. The searches had been made 2 days before Virelle vanished. Still, with no body and no direct evidence of a crime, police had little to act on. Kaela remained technically innocent in the eyes of the law, but her behavior continued to baffle those around her. She laughed too freely at press events, lingered too long in police stations without a reason, and kept inserting herself into every possible lead. To those watching from the outside, she was a devastated friend clinging to hope. But to the trained, eyes behind the investigation, she was starting to look like someone who didn't want justice for Virelle, only attention for herself. The mask was beginning to slip, and the investigators were ready to dig deeper. 2 weeks after Virelle Senn's mysterious disappearance, a cold morning in Ember Lake brought an unexpected breakthrough. A local hiker and her dog ventured off the main trail into the dense woods just beyond the tree line. The dog began to bark wildly near a patch of disturbed earth, its paws digging frantically. The woman, curious and concerned, approached and noticed what looked like fabric peeking through the soil. Authorities were called, and soon the quiet forest was swarming with crime scene tape, forensics teams, and officers with solemn faces. The fabric belonged to a scarf, elegant, silk, and blood-stained. Beneath it, shallowly buried, was the body of Virelle Senn. Her skin was pale and marked with bruises, her neck clearly broken. Strangulation marks confirmed what investigators feared. This wasn't an accident or a disappearance. This was murder. The discovery shifted the entire tone of the case. What had started as a missing person report was now a homicide investigation. Officers turned their attention sharply to Kaela Drayce. Her tear-filled interviews and emotional social media posts now seemed like part of a carefully constructed performance. The investigators stopped treating her like a grieving friend. They started treating her like a suspect. As detectives searched deeper, pieces began to fall into place. The scarf used in the murder matched several found in Kaela's home. Luxury. Accessories from a boutique she frequented. Fibers from a matching scarf were found in her car. The police obtained a search warrant and went through Kaela's house, her car, and her phone. Forensics uncovered a strand of Virelle's hair in the trunk of Kaela's vehicle. Small traces of soil were found beneath the floor mat, soil consistent with the type found in the wooded area where Virelle was buried. Kaela, however, continued her performance. When brought in for questioning, she wore a black dress and subtle makeup. Her eyes welled up as she described her grief. But investigators noticed her demeanor was inconsistent, detached one moment, overly emotional the next. When asked specific questions about her timeline, she became vague or changed the subject. She would smile suddenly, even flirt, as if trying to charm her way through the room rather than prove her innocence. She began bringing gifts to the station: coffee, snacks, even homemade cookies. She complimented officers on their work, asking personal questions and laughing too loudly at small talk. While most of the department ignored it, some newer officers found it unsettling. One even admitted he felt manipulated, like Kaela was, using her personality as a shield. Meanwhile, her social media continued to tell a different story. Her posts became more dramatic, even theatrical. One photo showed her lighting a candle beside Virelle's photo, captioned, "My light in the darkness. I will never stop fighting for you." But just hours later, she posted a selfie in full. Makeup with a cryptic caption, "You never know who's watching." The contrast was eerie. It no longer looked like grief. It looked like a performance. The police weren't the only ones watching Kaela closely. Virelle's family, heartbroken and confused, started to question Kaela's behavior. She had inserted herself into every decision, every public event, and every update. She seemed to thrive in the spotlight. She mourned louder than everyone else, yet gave the least meaningful answers when questioned. The family, once comforted by her support, began to feel uneasy. One investigator said later that Kaela acted less like someone trying to cover up a crime and more like someone trying to win an award for pretending she didn't commit one. The attention, the gestures, the charm, it wasn't about Virelle. It was all about Kaela. But attention couldn't hide evidence. The case against her was quietly growing, built not on a single confession or slip-up, but a pattern of carefully concealed guilt. Each piece of data, every inconsistency, every smile that came at the wrong time, it all pointed in one direction. And the woman who thought she could control the story was about to face a truth she couldn't bury. With Virelle's body recovered and the evidence against Kaela Drayce stacking up, investigators turned their attention to the digital trail that remained, data that could speak louder than any staged tears or crafted alibis. Detectives obtained a warrant for Kaela's phone, laptop, and smart devices. What they uncovered would become the most damning pieces of the puzzle. Deleted GPS records revealed an unusual trip Kaela had taken the night Virelle disappeared. After claiming she had returned home early that evening, her phone had actually pinged several towers along a remote highway leading out of Ember Lake. The final location matched almost exactly where Virelle's body had been found days later. The data showed she had stopped for over an hour at the site in the dead of night. Investigators concluded that she had used that window to bury the body. In addition to the GPS data, Kaela's internet history, partially deleted but recovered through forensic tools, showed chilling searches in the days leading up to the murder. She had researched burial depths, decomposition in forest soil, and even legal loopholes around self-defense. One search stood out in particular. Can police track deleted GPS history? She had tried to cover her tracks, but her desperation only made her guilt more evident. Security footage from a hardware store added another layer to the timeline. The day before Virelle vanished, Kaela had been caught on camera purchasing gloves, rope, a small shovel, and plastic sheeting. She had paid in cash and wore a hoodie, trying to avoid recognition. But the store's camera caught her face clearly as she exited the building. To the investigators, it was no longer a theory. It was premeditation. When the evidence was presented to Kaela during her next interview, she didn't cry or deny. She didn't shout or beg. She smiled. She brushed her hair back, crossed her legs, and asked for a glass of water. Her confidence was unnerving, and it became clear she had never believed the investigation would get this far. She offered vague explanations, claiming the items were for a camping trip and that she had gotten lost during her drive that night. None of her words matched the facts. The following day, when detectives returned with a warrant for her arrest, Kaela was gone. Her home was dark, her car missing, and her phone turned off. She had fled. A statewide manhunt was launched immediately. Her photo appeared on news broadcasts and social media. Tips began to pour in, but none led to her. She had vanished just as effectively as Virelle had weeks earlier. But this time, she was the one being hunted. 4 days later, her run ended. In a cheap roadside motel 2 towns away, a desk clerk recognized her face from the news and called the authorities. When they arrived, Kaela was found alone, wearing a dark wig and using a fake ID under the name Ella Crane. In her possession were prepaid debit cards, a burner, phone, and several changes of clothes. Her suitcase contained no photos, no journals, no trace of her past life, just the bare minimum for someone intending to disappear. She was arrested without resistance. Even in handcuffs, Kaela maintained her poise, standing tall and smiling faintly as if the cameras had come for her once more. Her attempt to outrun justice had failed, and now there was no more pretending, no more attention to control. As she was escorted into the station, reporters asked if she had anything to say. She simply looked into the lens of a camera and gave a wink. It was the final act in a performance that had gone on far too long. But for the first time, she wasn't the one holding the spotlight. Kaela Drayce's trial began 6 months after her arrest. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious locals, and Virelle Senn's devastated family. The small town of Ember Lake, once a quiet and trusting community, had become a place shadowed by betrayal and loss. At the center of it all stood Kaela, calm, composed, and dressed in tailored black as if still attending a social event rather than facing charges of first-degree murder. The prosecution presented a case built on methodical evidence, GPS data, surveillance footage, forensic matches, and a timeline that made Kaela's lies impossible to ignore. They painted a picture of jealousy and obsession, of a woman so consumed with control and attention that she saw her best friend's independence as a threat. The motive, they argued, wasn't just about rage, it was about relevance. Kaela couldn't bear the thought of Virelle leaving her behind, starting a new life, and no longer needing her. So she took matters into her own hands, ending the life of the only person who had ever truly trusted her. The most powerful moment came when a forensic analyst detailed how Virelle was killed. The bruising patterns, the struggle, the shallow grave. It was clear the act had been personal, not impulsive, not defensive, deliberate. A hush fell over the courtroom as photographs of the burial site were shown, and many looked away, unable to stomach the reality. Virelle's parents quietly wept. Her sister left the room. Kaela's defense tried to discredit the evidence, calling it circumstantial. They claimed the police had tunnel vision, that Kaela had been unfairly targeted because of her popularity. They hinted at the possibility of another suspect, someone from Virelle's past, but they offered no names and no proof. They focused instead on Kaela's image, the charity events, the community service, the tears on camera. They said she was being punished for how she grieved, not for what she'd done. But the jury didn't buy it. Throughout the trial, Kaela remained unfazed. She rarely showed emotion. She scribbled notes, adjusted her jewelry, and occasionally smiled when testimony seemed to favor her. But she never looked toward Virelle's family, never expressed remorse. It was as if she still believed she could turn the narrative in her favor. Even when the prosecution played her own online videos, those bizarre, tearful tributes followed by glamorous selfies, Kaela sat without flinching. Her performance had become habit, and reality no longer seemed to reach her. The verdict came after just 5 hours of deliberation. Guilty Kaela blinked slowly as the words were read. No tears, no outbursts, just silence. For once there were no cameras, no applause, no admiration. Just the weight of judgment settling over her like a shadow she could no longer escape. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom exhaled. Justice, though delayed, had arrived. In prison, Kaela tried at first to reclaim some version of her spotlight. She offered interviews to small-time reporters, wrote long letters about her unfair treatment, and even started a prison support group she dubbed Women of Grace. But interest quickly faded. People moved on. The world outside had no more patience for her charm. Back in Ember Lake, the town quietly honored Virelle's memory. A memorial bench was placed outside the hospital where she worked, engraved with the words, "Compassion never dies." Her family chose to remember her not as a victim, but as a woman who gave everything to others, even her trust. The loss never healed, but the truth, at last, had been uncovered. Kaela Drayce had spent her life-controlling narratives. But in the end, the story told itself, and it ended not with a spotlight, but with silence.